lessons from successful D365 implementations, and updates to the D365 Warehouse mobile app. Those are just two of the topics we're going to cover here in episode number 4 of the Journey to D365 podcast.
Welcome to Journey to D365, the podcast that covers everything related to Microsoft Dynamics 365 implementations. This podcast is not affiliated with Microsoft and covers the realistic truth behind D365 finance and operations and Business Central ERP implementation success. Whether you're new to the world of Microsoft or not, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
Hello, welcome to episode number 4 of the Journey to D365 podcast. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm here at Darian Fiakuski. You can find new episodes of this show every week by going to journey2d365.com. You can also see the past episodes you might have missed by going to that same website, journey2d365.com. My name is Eric Kimberling. As I mentioned, I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys, including D365 implementations, but not limited to D365 implementations. Because we're not affiliated with Microsoft, we work with all kinds of software providers. But this podcast is obviously focused exclusively on what it takes to be successful in your D365 implementation. So thank you for being here today. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, the company that I work for. So thanks for being here today. Got a great show for you today. We're going to have our guest later in the show is going to be Jeff Nelson, who's a manager at the Third Stage Consulting team here on our team. He's going to be here with us chatting about some of the lessons from successful D365 implementations. And before we bring Jeff on, though, we're going to cover a social media question that we received on social media about D365 implementations. And we'll also talk about the new releases and updates to the Warehouse mobile app within D365. So excited for that. But before we get to our guest later today, let's jump into the social media question you have in store for us, Darian.
Yeah. So today's social media question is, what would you suggest on starting a tech consulting company without having any prior work experience with a corporate firm or big tech?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that I would suggest starting a big tech a consulting firm without having that tech experience. If you're certified, then that's great. If you have a knowledge of a certain product, that's great. The caveat would be if you have other people that are, people you could hire or bring on it to help you start the company that might have the experience you don't have. That would be my suggestion if you are going to start it, just to partner with or bring on people with you that might have a little bit more experience. So I found a lot of success just by trying to surround myself constantly with people that know more than I do and are smarter than me. So if you do that, then I think that might help overcome the fact that you don't have a ton of experience to start.
Yeah, but overall, a cool social question, something that maybe we don't hear a lot of, is more of what Eric's experience is for entrepreneurship. So I feel like those kinds of questions are always cool too. So any sort of questions that you have for Eric or about D365 or any other software, we will be sure to answer if you just leave it on any of our socials. But to get into today's newsworthy topic, it is about Microsoft Dynamics supply chain management warehouse update. This includes an auto submission of detour steps, the mobile app shipment packing, a guided implementation experience, and an optimization with application insights. Planning now includes sales quotations and enhanced supply forecasts with procurement tools for assessing risk and multi-vendor sourcing. This update supports multilingual product info and adds Korean, Portuguese, and Vietnamese and Chinese to all the languages for the app. Eric, with all these updates to the app, what do you think and how do you think this influences when it comes to user adoption?
Yeah, I think anything you could do to make it easier for people to use the software, that's going to increase user adoption. So, or it's going to enhance the user adoption. So, yeah, I think they sound like great enhancements that will likely improve and enhance that overall employee experience, which in theory should make it easier for them to adapt to the software as well.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Anything that you can add to maybe make it a little bit simpler for whoever is using the Warehouse mobile app, I feel like is definitely a good thing. Also, how do you find the new usability features like adding more languages or a guided implementation experience? How do you find specific things like that to help expand within companies?
Yeah, I think it's certainly helpful. I mean, if you look at what Microsoft is doing here with some of these enhancements, they're taking the product, the base product they already had, and they're just making it more accessible, whether it's on a mobile device that's, more convenient for a warehouse worker. Think about a warehouse worker. They don't necessarily want to be at a terminal all day. They're out walking around, they're picking, packing, shipping, they're driving a forklift or doing whatever they do. So bringing the software to them in a way that they can access the software easier in a way they're used to, that's going to help. And same with the language. If you can speak the language of the local market, especially if you're a multinational organization, you can't assume that everyone's just going to understand English, especially a blue collar worker that works in a warehouse in another country. You can't assume that they're going to speak English well or understand it well. So having multiple languages is just going to not only make it easier for those people to learn the software, but it's going to make sure that you get accurate data in the system too. Because if they don't understand or it's not their first language, it's more likely that they're going to have a user error, a data entry type of error, or a usability error that creates data issues and visibility issues. So I think it's all good stuff, and they're small, incremental, but important steps to increasing adoption, I would say, based on what I understand of the upgrade.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's definitely something that can help, especially when you speak of um, companies that are in multiple different countries. I think that's definitely something that can be helpful for those companies specifically, especially.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to talk with Jeff later today about the lessons that he's learned from successful implementations. I feel like that will be a really interesting topic for today.
Yeah, it's going to be a great topic. We're going to have Jeff on. He's a manager at Third Stage Consulting. He actually used to be a CIO, so he worked on the other side of the table as a CIO, which many of you probably are as well. Many of you listening might be CIOs or IT managers. He was in your shoes implementing D365, and now he's in our shoes as consultants, helping other clients implement D365 and other ERP systems as well. So we're going to have him on the show talking about what makes D365 implementation successful and how those successful implementations differ from troubled or struggling D365 implementation. So if you're going through a transformation involving D365, you won't want to miss this interview. We're going to bring Jeff on the show in just a moment, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more of the Journey to D365 podcast.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you'll want to download the Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how you can take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to episode number 4 of the Journey to D365 podcast. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Fiatkuski. You can find new episodes of this show every week by going to journey2d365.com. And this podcast series and this season is focused on how to be successful in your D365 implementations. And that's the topic of today's interview. We're going to have Jeff Nelson on the show, who's a manager at Third Stage Consulting. He's going to share his perspective on what it takes to be successful in D365 implementations. So with that all being said, Jeff, thanks for being on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So before we get started and really dive into some of these questions I have for you about D365 implementations, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. Well, for the majority of my career prior to joining Third Stage, I was in the telecom infrastructure business, primarily on the wireless communication side. So I worked for a company that was building and upgrading cell towers all over the U.S. We were one of the largest at the time, working for the major cell phone carriers directly. And during my over 15 years there, I went through 2 different ERP implementations. First was an on-prem Oracle implementation in the 2009-10 timeframe. And then in 2017, we decided to go to Microsoft Dynamics D365. It was a pretty new product at that time. And so as part of that implementation, we actually looked at Third Stage to help us along that journey. And I was advocating for hiring Third Stage, and that's where you and I met. And
right.
Unfortunately, we didn't hire you, and I still think that was a big contributor to the problems that the company had with that D365 implementation, quite frankly. And as part of a spinoff of that company a few years later, we implemented D365 again in the new entity that was spun out of the original company as a new standalone business. So went through 2 D365 implementations on the client side, right? And kept up with Third Stage and decided to try and join you guys a couple of years ago, and here I am. So
right. Yeah. It worked out. Maybe it worked out for a reason then.
Maybe it all worked out.
Even though we didn't.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's super interesting. Now, before I jump into my real questions here, I have to ask you a personal question real quick. You and I have known each other for a while, as you mentioned, and you have a band that you follow around and you're a huge fan of. Can you talk a little bit about that and just share the personal story real quick?
So, coming of age in the 90s, Pearl Jam is my favorite band of all time. I've seen them 39 times. And 39 times. And by the end of this summer, that number will be at least 43, as I have tickets to 4 shows on the upcoming tour. And we'll see if we can't add to that.
Yeah, that's great. That's really cool. You shared some cool stories about some of the performances you've seen and some of the places you've been to see them. So I think that's pretty cool that you've done that. And us both being rock and roll and music fans, I couldn't jump into the conversation without first covering that important personal detail.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned the company you work for was the telco wireless sort of company that you worked for 15 years. You did the 2 D365 implementations there. So, obviously there's I imagine a heavy field service component to that piece of it, and managing mobile assets and that sort of thing. But is that generally the type of client that you see here at Third Stage going towards or gravitating toward D365 or implementing D365, or do you see other types of clients, or what kinds of clients are using the product most likely? So
right now I'm directly on a project with a client of ours that's in the distribution space, industrial distribution. So no field service at all, but very heavy on material planning, 11 warehouses throughout the generally Southeast United States, and lots of small parts, right? So heavy warehouse management application use there. And probably 3 or 4 months away from a go live, right? So we're getting very close, and but that's a different type of D365 use. I've also seen completely different industry, property management, right? I've seen a couple different ones of those. One being a real estate firm, and another one being a property management company that manages rentals, long-term leases for commercial properties, and construction projects, all going to D365.
Yeah, that's interesting. A lot of variety
Yeah,
in the types of companies that are
absolutely.
using the product.
Yep.
What are some of the pros and cons of D365? And just to clarify for the audience too, and just for this conversation, when we say we're talking about D365, we're talking about the finance and operations, the F&O version of D365. But what would you say the main pros and cons of F&O are in general, with your experience both on the customer side as well as here on the consulting side?
Well, I think what could be considered a pro and a con is the high configurability of D365. There are just so many different ways the system can be configured in every conceivable module. Now, that's good because, as I said, I've seen it in vastly different industries and used well, but that configuration takes time, right? And takes time and costs money on the consultant side to get you through that journey of exactly how you're going to set up the system.
Yeah. We do tell clients that a lot. I mean, it's interesting because on the software selection side of our business, when we're evaluating D365, that's one of the things that draws people to the product is how flexible it is and how open it is. But it's also a slippery slope. It seems like, just because you can configure the software doesn't always mean you should. And so, how do you differentiate between the things you should be or ought to be configuring versus the things that you're just doing it because you can, not because you should?
Yeah, exactly. And, when you get into a D365 implementation and you hear the terms are out of the box, right? That can be a bit of a misnomer because, yeah, it's out of the box. If I spend 10 hours configuring everything you want it to do, but yes, that's out of the box. I don't have to crack the code open to do anything different, but I do need to set up many configurations to make it work for the, whatever your business process that you're describing is.
Yeah. So in other words, you don't just turn it on and it just has the industry pre-configuration already done. It's just, you have the option to create the configuration.
That's right.
What you're saying?
That's right. It really doesn't push you towards a best practice. It allows for many different ways to get a singular process done.
Yeah. So when you talk about the flexibility of configuration, what about the flexibility of integration? Is that another strength that you're seeing just in terms of the Microsoft open architecture and that sort of thing? How have you seen that unfold or not, with our clients and your experience?
Well, the client that I was describing that's close to go live, we have 5 or 6 different ISVs that are a part of the project that are plugged into Microsoft Dynamics. And I think all but one of them is really a very native plugin to where you can't tell that you're leaving a Dynamics because it's just a new menu item that's in the Dynamics menu screen. So that's a really deep integration and works really well. As far as building, outside integrations that are API based or even EDI file based, we're doing some of that as well. And yes, Microsoft's highly capable of doing that, but again, because it's not pushing you one way is the only way to do it, like say an SAP might tend to do. There is a lot of work to get there, right, from the consultant side and the other software vendor who you might be bringing into the project.
Right. Yeah. It makes a ton of sense. And for those that don't know, ISV is what does it stand for? Independent software vendor? Is that what it stands for?
Yes, correct.
So an ISV, that's something that's worth noting here with Microsoft D365 is it is sort of a unique part of Microsoft's model with D365 is you have these third-party providers that use the D365 platform to tailor it or customize it for a certain industry or a certain function or a certain use case that maybe the standard software doesn't do well. And so in those cases, have you said there's 6 or 7 in this case? So 6 or 7 ISVs that are just creating different functions within D365, but they're sort of plugins or add-ons to the
Correct.
core product.
Correct. Like a payment processor is one. The out of the box, there's that word again, out of the box. Payment didn't work well enough for this particular client with multiple locations, multiple payment types, and multiple bank accounts. That Dynamics didn't like that. So we have a payment provider that's a part of the project, for example.
Interesting. How hard is it to find these ISVs in your experience? You know, if you find a gap in the solution and you think, hey, is there an ISV out there that does, you know, whatever the function is it hard to find, or how did this client find those 6 or 7 ISVs?
I think a combination, right? A combination of coming to me and having me do some research and plugging a gap for them, and even the main system integrator made some introductions or suggestions as well too.
Yeah. And speaking of system integrators and VARs, I'm going to come back to that because I have a question about just the ecosystem of Microsoft and D365 and some of the potential pitfalls there. But so you talk about flexibility of configuration, of integration. What about what other advantages do you see or strengths do you see when you compare D365 to other technologies or solutions in the market? Are there other like functional or technical strengths that you see?
I think the integration to the Microsoft Office platform is really strong, and people are comfortable with it. You know, not only can you export to Excel, but you can actually open certain things in Excel, manipulate the data there if you want to do mass updates, and then publish that into Dynamics straight from Excel. You're not going to find that deep integration as much in other ERP systems.
Right. Yeah, it's a good point. I think a lot of software vendors are trying to do that, and they have some amount of integration to Office, but not the same way D365 does.
Yeah, I don't think Microsoft will let them get quite all the way there. Particularly in the CRM, right, with Outlook contacts and managing emails and so on and so forth. That's another, really well done integration.
I'm here with Jeff Nelson. We're talking about the keys to successful D365 implementations. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more of the Journey to D365 podcast. I recently published my first book. It's called The Final Countdown: Strategies to Reach the Third Stage of Digital Transformation. And I wrote this book because I really wanted to find a concise way to share some of my knowledge around digital strategy and how to get started on a digital transformation journey. So in this book, I cover 3 different sections. I cover the people, process, and technology aspects of transformation, with the idea that it's meant to be a starting point, a launching pad for organizations and team members that are going through digital transformations. So I encourage you to buy this book. You can get it electronically, you can get it paperback, or you can get it in hard copy, as I'm holding here in front of you. You can get it by going to thefinalcountdown.com. You can also search for it on Amazon if you shop at Amazon. Otherwise, just go to thefinalcountdown.com. Love to hear your feedback on this book as well. So I hope you check it out and hope you enjoy.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me, or visit our website for more details.
Hello, welcome back to episode number 4 of the Journey to D365 podcast. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Fiakuski. You can find new episodes of this show by going to journey2d365.com. You can also listen to and watch past episodes of the show by going to that same website, journey2d365.com. And I'm here with Jeff Nelson. We're talking about what it takes to be successful and what some of the unique traits of successful D365 implementations are compared to those that aren't as successful. What about the user interface and just the Microsoft look and feel? How big of an advantage is that? Is it an advantage, first of all? And how do you see that affecting sort of user adoption or just ease of use and that sort of thing?
Well, I guess maybe a personal point of view is it doesn't feel as much of a website as some of the other ERP systems do. It feels like I'm more in a system and not working through a website as much. And for some people that could be a pro, and for other people that'll be a con, for sure. But I do like some of the flexibility and being able to navigate through screens, setting up your own personal views, and in some cases making those views public, right? If you get a good looking screen, and one that you've maybe added a few columns to that aren't in the quote out of the box view, and then you can publish that to let's say your customer service team if you're a customer service manager, and now you know that
Right.
everyone's working off one sheet of music.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what about the the downside? You talked about how the flexibility is a pro and a con, or a strength and a weakness, but are there other weaknesses of the product that you might point out just to be aware of so we can navigate those as we're implementing the solution?
Well, I don't know if this is so much a weakness of the product, but the implementations are hard and cumbersome on the client, both in terms of the configurations that we talked about earlier. There's just a lot of decisions to be made, a lot of involvement that the client's going to have to get it right. That's not so much different from other systems, but in Microsoft, there are so many things you have to consider and make decisions on that the client's got to be, very keenly engaged and aware of what their SI is needing to keep the project moving.
Yeah, that's a great point. That flexibility piece, the dark side of flexibility, really does kind of percolate or trickle through the entire project for sure.
Yeah, I know we keep coming back to it, but I do believe it's probably the biggest pro and perhaps the biggest con of the Dynamics system.
Yeah. What do you see as the biggest advantage or business benefit of using the product, either based on your customer facing side experience or as a consultant? Where do you see the biggest business value for companies that deploy D365?
I think it's very, very likely that you will be able to get it to configure your entire end-to-end business. Now, you might have to bring in some of the ISVs to do that, but they exist, right? They all exist. So it's quite likely you'll be able to get everything you need under one roof at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and again, we'll come back to that because that's a big discussion point, is the ISV/VAR/system integrator ecosystem side of it. What are some of the biggest risks then? You mentioned that it's a difficult implementation. There's a lot of decisions to be made. It puts a lot of pressure on the implementing organization to make decisions and to be engaged. What other risks do you see that are unusual or maybe a bit heightened for D365 implementations compared to others?
I would say because of the high configurability, it's even more important to get your phase 0 done right, get your requirements well documented, make sure all of your business processes are documented and well understood so you can explain them to your SI. You want to avoid surprises as you get further down the project. So spending that extra bit of time up front before you even look at the software, past the demo phase, spending that time getting to know your SI and making sure they understand all of your business needs and all of the different transactions that you have to go through the system to get that architecture done right up front is really important, because the risk of scope creep and project extensions and change orders becomes, that risk is extreme if you're not well defined going into the project.
Yeah. That phase 0 / implementation planning / business blueprinting process up front is really key. And that, addresses a lot of those challenges you mentioned around decision making and needing to have clarity around what you want your processes to be and what your future state's going to be, so that you can be more engaged and answer those questions more quickly. Otherwise, if you're scrambling to make the decisions as you go, it just adds a lot of time and money to the project. That we see that time and time again for projects that have struggled in their implementations. How have you seen then, coming back to this flexibility thread, then how have you seen clients navigate the need to balance the flexibility of D365 versus the potential need to want to standardize or have common business processes across their end-to-end enterprise? What's some advice you have or your observations around that with our clients?
Well, I think you don't want your system integrator to keep telling you, yeah, we can do that out of the box. They need to be asking you more questions than a simple, we can do that out of the box, we can do that out of the box. That's them leading you down a road that's going to cause problems as you get towards into the implementation, right? Again, that gets back to needing to define your scope of work up front.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And back to the point about out of the box not really existing. I mean, there is no such thing as out of the box. So you still have to decide, how do you want the tiniest little workflow to work? How do you want that screen to look? There's all these different things you can do that, you need to make decisions on. And if you don't, it ends up being your ISV or your VAR that makes the decisions for you, which may or may not be right.
Exactly right.
How do, what about, we talked a little bit about integration, but I want to come back to that for a moment. I'm not sure how technical you are. I don't want to turn this into a real deep dive into architecture or integration tools or things like that. But in general, how does D365 or how well does D365 integrate to, let's call it non-Microsoft tools, not just the ISV stuff, of course, that's baked within or tied to D365 a bit more directly. But what about legacy systems that we know we're going to keep either long-term or just in the interim, or other bolt-ons that are non-Microsoft? How hard or easy is it to handle that integration between D365 and these other systems?
So you can write APIs that go out, to really anywhere, any other endpoint to exchange data, but you're writing from scratch in every case, right? There's not some sort of integration platform sitting natively in Dynamics, at least that I'm aware of. Now I have seen success with being able to do that. I've also seen success where, well, maybe we're not going to try and bring data into D365. We're just going to put it in a data lake and be able to, through a Power BI or some other visualization tool, be able to marry that data up in a dashboard type format, right? I've had quite a bit of success doing that myself from the client side. When I was in the operations into the company.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. And do you find that a lot of D365 customers and yourself as a former customer, is there a lot of integration happening typically between D365 and other systems?
Frankly, no. I not in my experience, right? Again, I've seen a lot of comparative analysis, but all outside of D365, right? Take D365 data and look at it, in a visualization tool, but frankly, not in the tool itself.
Right. Well, speaking of visualization tools and other Microsoft tools, what about like Power BI and some of these other tools that Microsoft provides outside of the world of D365? You mentioned Office and how Microsoft Office integrates well with D365 and vice versa. What about some of the other Microsoft products that are out there like Power BI and others? Have you seen those integrate or
yes.
effectively used?
Yes. I mean, Microsoft has, here we go again, out of the box dashboards in Dynamics that are built on Power BI, right? You can see it there. You can actually go in and change the design of some of the, if you want a bar chart instead of a pie chart or something like that, you can easily do that in what is a Power BI interface in the box in Dynamics 365. But
Gotcha.
And again, you can expose those data tables, those Dynamics data tables, or what I see more commonly is you have a copy to a data warehouse of the Dynamics tables, and you can do anything you could probably imagine through Power BI from there.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Well, let's talk about the whole reseller, system integrator, and ISV ecosystem aspect of it. I mean, one thing that we've observed as a company, and I've written about and talked about in YouTube videos, is how, one of the strengths of Microsoft is also a weakness, just like you talked about with the flexibility. Another example of a strength and a weakness combined is the ecosystem they've built. I mean, I think Microsoft has done a particularly good job of building a broad and deep and diverse ecosystem of partners that can implement the product, they can sell you the product. But I also think that they've taken more of a laissez-faire, hands-off approach to their ecosystem as well, to where you get a lot of variation or variability in the qualities and qualifications and effectiveness of the different VARs. What has your observation been in terms of working with different VARs and ISVs and system integrators? What's your general experience been?
Well, I think the selection of your system integrator is at least as important as the selection of your software, particularly when it's a Microsoft Dynamics. There are system integrators that specialize by industry. I think that's probably the way to go. But you absolutely want to be checking references, find people in your similar industry. If they can't give you a good reference, you probably want to keep looking for another system integrator. I've seen good and bad, and good and bad could be in terms of the talent level, just the baseline talent level, or I think more importantly or more likely is the fit for your industry. I think that to me is the most important matchup to make, is that industry expertise.
So back when I was doing more of the hands-on consulting and doing the software selection and some of the SI selection or the VAR selection for our clients that were evaluating D365, I remember there being a situation or a sort of a pattern where you had a lot of smaller mom and pop or really small 1 or 3 or 5 man or woman shops that were selling and implementing D365, but they weren't necessarily qualified or big enough or whatever the case may be to support some of the complex needs of an organization. So, how do you see this going in the Microsoft space? Do you think it's getting better as far as Microsoft doing a better job of certifying and sort of vetting out some of the VARs in the space, or how do you see that unfolding?
Well, I guess I would say I've seen VARs bite off more than they can chew, and system integrators overpromise both from a resource and a capability standpoint. So you do want to be very careful of that, and in your contract with your SI, make sure you're addressing the resource management side of it, and their ability to commit to the project and not be juggling too many projects for one consultant to handle at once. I've seen that in some prior implementations, and it absolutely elongated the project. Maybe it didn't end up costing more in terms of raw dollars, but it certainly costed more in terms of time, which time can be money as well, as we all know.
I'm here with Jeff Nelson. We're talking about the keys to successful D365 implementations. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more of the Journey to D365 podcast.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me, or visit our website for more details.
Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting and your host of Transformation Ground Control. I want to encourage you to read our Guide to Organizational Change Management. It's a free report or free guide that we published. It's one that I actually wrote that talks about best practices and lessons learned as it relates to change management. So as you know, on this podcast, we cover a lot of stuff related to the human sides of change, organizational change management, including training, communications, org design, all kinds of stuff as it relates to change management. So if you're trying to learn more about change management, or you're looking for more direction and ideas on how to get started on your change management strategy and your overall journey, be sure to check out this guide. You can read it by scanning the QR code on the screen in front of you, or in the links below for this particular podcast episode. You can find a link to take you to the page that will allow you to register to go ahead and download that and read it for free. So be sure to check it out. It's the Guide to Organizational Change Management, written by yours truly. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think, and hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Hello, welcome back to episode number 4 of the Journey to D365 podcast. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Fiakuski. You can find new episodes of this show by going to journey2d365.com. You can also listen to and watch past episodes of the show by going to that same website, journey2d365.com. And I'm here with Jeff Nelson. We're talking about what it takes to be successful and what some of the unique traits of successful D365 implementations are compared to those that aren't as successful. if you compare Microsoft to SAP or Oracle, who they often compete against with D365 sales, it seems like SAP and Oracle have maybe the opposite problem, which is they have like really big system integrators supporting them, like Deloitte and Accenture and Capgemini and all these big, massive consulting firms. In fact, so much so that it's harder to find a really good, smaller, mid-sized company if that's what you want, to support your project. Whereas Microsoft seems a lot more fragmented. It's more fragmented, and you've got Avanade, is one of the bigger, sort of spin-off from Accenture that is focused on D365 implementations. But beyond that, there's not a ton of big system integrators yet that have really, established themselves well in the D365 space in the same way that, those big guys have established themselves well with SAP, for example. So I'll be curious to see if that changes over time, or if you start to see more Deloittes and Accentures and Capgeminis of the world doing more in bigger D365 implementations.
Yeah, that will be interesting to see if that develops, because it's definitely not the case today.
So just to bring this all full circle for those listening here today that are getting ready to get started, or they're just getting started on their D365 journey, what are some of the tips or advice you'd give just to help them get started on that path?
Advanced planning, selection of your system integrator and the project team internally, right? Having executive alignment through a steering committee down to the project manager and the project team and SMEs, involvement from multiple aspects of the business. It's not an IT project, regardless of what system you're implementing. They certainly have a big seat at the table, but it's not an IT project. It's a company-wide project driven by the business. I think an independent third party such as Third Stage can be really helpful in keeping the project on the rails, if you will, and moving forward and driving some of the project discipline in governance structure that is absolutely required of a journey this large. Any Dynamics implementation is a big deal. It's a big commitment from your company, in both in terms of time and money. So you want to get it right. And I believe that having some experienced guidance who's done D365 before, implemented it before, could be really helpful to an organization starting that journey.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's sort of like when you build a house, you're not going to, you may have picked your contractors and your subcontractors and all that stuff, but you're not just going to tell them all to go get started. You're going to sit down first and say, okay, well, let's get a blueprint of the house first. Let's do some iterations of it. Let's make sure we're all on the same page with what we want of our house before you have the contractor start building. And then, of course, then you've got the plan. How are we going to start building? We're not going to have the plumber show up first. We're going to have, someone laying the foundation first or whatever. Okay. I'm not a house builder, so I'm faking it right now. But but it's a similar sort of thing where a lot of organizations will they'll pick D365 and say, okay, we're going D365. Now let's bring in the VAR, the system integrator, to go start building stuff. But you end up spinning your wheels because you don't have that blueprint done. And so phase 0 advanced planning that you're talking about is so important, because, it may slow down a little bit the start of the technical work stream, but it's going to speed things up exponentially, beyond that, if you get all those decisions made up front and you've got that clarity. And you, like you said too, if you've got that executive alignment and the resources in place and you're mobilized, you're ready to go, then you bring in the system integrator or the technical resources to help you start building the stuff. So I think it's a really good, solid advice there. So
yeah.
Well, good. Well, thank you. Thanks for being here, Jeff. Really appreciate it. This is super helpful, and look forward to having you back on in the future, maybe to see how this project goes and some of your lessons from the go live here a few months away. So good luck with that project and others that you're working on in the meantime.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Eric.
All right. Thank you again, Jeff. Really appreciate your feedback and your insights and sharing your experience, both as a consultant, but also as a buyer, as a customer of D365. So some very unique perspective there that I certainly don't have. So really good to have you on the show here. We've got a lot to cover. We're going to debrief on some of the things we talked about there with Jeff. We're going to build on some of those topics and themes, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more of the Journey to D365 podcast. Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting, and I want to invite you to join our annual tech agnostic conference called Digital Stratosphere. Digital Stratosphere is a conference that features some of the industry's brightest minds, greatest thinkers, and it's a great opportunity to network with peers, other industry people, other CIOs, other project team members that are going through digital transformations or ERP implementations. We've got a great lineup of speakers this year. It's a 3-day event, a lot of great entertainment, networking opportunities. I'll be there as one of the keynote speakers, along with some of my favorite speakers in the industry as well, both within Third Stage Consulting, but also outside the company as well. So I encourage you to check it out and learn more. You can go to stratosphere2024.com to learn more about the event. You can see the agenda, the way it's shaping up, and you can see some of the past testimonials of people that have attended. And the event is October 2nd through the 4th, 2024. It's going to be based in Denver, Colorado, downtown Denver, beautiful downtown Denver in the fall, which is a great time to visit Denver if you haven't been. Again, stratosphere2024.com. Check out the agenda. Check out our early bird pricing for passes. And the other beautiful things, if you can't be here in person in Denver, which we hope you can, but if you can't, you can also join remotely as well. We have virtual passes available as well, so you're able to join from wherever in the world you might want to join from. So stratosphere2024.com, check it out, and I hope to see you there.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to the Journey to D365 podcast. My name is Eric Kimberling. This is episode number 4. I'm here with Darian Fiakuski, and we just had Jeff Nelson on the show, Darian, talking about what it takes to be successful or what some of the unique traits of successful implementations are. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from that conversation?
Yeah, overall, I thought the conversation was great. I think Jeff really shed a light on the complexities and considerations that are really involved with deploying D365 successfully, in particular, in terms of planning and partner selection and managing implementation risks. I feel like that was something that he also talked about a lot, and I feel like really put an emphasis on when it comes to successful D365 implementations as well. Eric, how do you recommend organizations balance the need for flexibility in D365 with the imperative need to define clear project scopes and requirements up front?
Well, I guess there's 2 parts to it. One would be the flexibility of business processes. If you want your business processes to be flexible and to potentially be decentralized or different for different parts of the world or different business units, that's okay. And D365 can certainly enable that. But I think the key is to not think of it as an either or answer or an across the board sort of a decision that needs to be made. What I mean by that is you might have different answers for different parts of your business. For example, if you're an organization that's moving to more of a centralized, consolidated finance and accounting group, it might be that you want to have a standard set of business processes and one way of operating. But when it comes to, order entry in different parts of the world, you might have different ways that you take orders based on that local market, and you want that flexibility. And so you're going to treat those processes and the way you handle the implementation differently for those 2 different parts of the business, the standardized finance and accounting piece versus the more flexible, decentralized, if you will, order entry processes. So, it's not one answer for the entire organization. Typically it comes back to what are our goals and objectives as a company? What is it we want to accomplish with this project? And then you answer that question in the context of different parts of the implementation. But the key is to answer the question and have alignment and consensus on this is what we're doing, and this is why we're doing it, and this is how we're doing it. And you build that into your overall project plan and strategy going forward.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. Could you also provide maybe some examples of the most common integration challenges organizations face when connecting D365 with non-Microsoft tools or legacy systems?
Yeah, I'd say, one of the biggest ones is going to be in the manufacturing execution system, the shop floor automation. A lot of times that can be difficult to integrate robotics and some of the MES software you might be using if it's not Microsoft-based products. That can be a little bit more difficult to integrate. And to be fair, it's difficult to integrate with any ERP system, not just Microsoft. Microsoft, if anything, is easier to integrate with just because the open architecture and the platform itself is more conducive to integration. But generally speaking, that's one of the more challenging areas to integrate. And then, certainly there's a lot of regulatory types of systems that are sort of one-off or very specialized to one industry that can be sometimes difficult to integrate with Microsoft or any other ERP products. So those are just a couple examples.
Yeah, that makes sense. And how important is industry experience versus general technical proficiency when selecting SI for D365 implementations?
I would argue it's actually more important than the industry knowledge is more important than the technical knowledge, because you can always find someone that knows the product, and the product is it's not simple, but it's a little more black and white. It works a certain way. There's a certain way you configure it. Yes, you need to know it, but that doesn't really matter if you know the software, but you don't understand the industry. And what I mean by that, or just as an example, is if you don't understand the industry, you're going to be more likely to want to customize the software because you don't know how things could work in the software if you really understood the industry and what sort of the end state is that the implementing organization's trying to get to. So I'd say absolutely you want to know that your partner has industry experience. And I take it even a step further with Microsoft and say, is it an ISV, a third-party provider that not only has experience in your industry, but has built some intellectual property specifically on the D365 platform that's specific to your industry. So there's a couple of different layers there, but I think it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. What another great episode for Journey to D365 podcast. I think this has been such a fun series so far to learn all the different things.
Yeah, tons of good stuff we covered here today, and a lot more to come here throughout this season, this first season of the Journey to D365 podcast. If you missed any of the past episodes, or you want to keep an eye on upcoming episodes, just go to journey2d365.com. That's the podcast event page. You can see and watch any episode you might have missed. You can also keep an eye on the new episodes as they drop. They will stream directly to that website, among other platforms as well. So journey to D365.com is where to check it out. Hope to see you next week. Thank you again for a great show, Darian. Thanks, Jeff, for being here today. Thanks to the audience for the great questions. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next week on the Journey to D365 podcast. Take care.